Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Amadei and I'm the Director of Horticulture at Planfarm, and privileged to be here today presenting to you on our Level Up Hort project. Firstly, welcome to you all and thank you for joining this afternoon. Particularly, I'd like to welcome and acknowledge our project funders in Hort Innovation, particularly to Lucy Noble and Mark Spees, who have been wonderful contacts for us through this startup project. My Planfarm colleagues, particularly Steph Carstairs, who's the project manager, and also our farm business consultants who have been a part of the collecting and delivering of information to growers through WA, SA, Northern Territory and Northern Queensland for the Planfarm team. And also special welcome to our partners, RMCG, who are our project partners equally across this project and who are delivering the on-ground works and also assisting with project overarching management in Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales and South Queensland. Again, welcome to you all. Level Up Hort is pretty groundbreaking project across horticulture across Australia. It's a 5-year project, and pretty much it is based on looking at growers' businesses in depth in a more overarching way than what would have been done in previous benchmarking projects. So sometimes benchmarking doesn't have a good name, but certainly within Planfarm and RMCG and what Hort Innovation, our funders, are looking for is really key insights into businesses across Australia and each of the states, which is what this first year of results is going to actually show. And keep in mind that it is 1 year of results, and what we're aiming for here is to gather a longer term view, longitudinal view based on what's actually happening in Hort businesses across Australia. And obviously, particularly, this is the Vegetable Fund and Onion Fund, which are funding this project. So what is it and why are we analysing businesses like we are in this project across the country? So there's 3 key areas to this. It's obviously looking at the business analysis for growers and benefits to them, and then obviously some industry benefits and insights. So for the growers in particular, where this project is very different to previous projects in benchmarking is that this is a complete business analysis for growers on a one-to-one confidential basis. So what that means is that the business consultants are speaking to the growers one-to-one, collecting the data, analysing it, cleansing it. We call it cleansing because we're looking at this from a perspective of year of effort. So what has the grower actually done in terms of costs, application and effort to actually arrive at selling product off their farm? And so that's what's called a year of effort. So it's very different to a financial year. Many of the businesses in the southern part of Australia still operate on a July to June basis, which is what we call a year of effort. But the analysis really does look and focus on what has actually happened to get that production, to turn it into cash flow, profit, and how that affects the balance sheet. What actually is derived from that then is an individual benchmark report, which growers are what we call de-identified. So none of their data that goes into the benchmark report will be able to identify either where they are, what they grow, how big they are, or who they are. So that's completely confidential and is critical to any sort of industry analysis or benchmarking. So that de-identified data goes into a benchmark data set, and that's how we derive the information that we're going to go through today. So you'll see a lot of the information is either based on ratios as a percentage of income or costs, or on a dollars per hectare basis. So that way, no individual grower can be identified, no matter how small or big the data set is. Obviously, the grower benefits are quite large. I think the increase in business analysis skill is quite important as part of this. We're not saying that growers aren't skilled in business analysis, but certainly the overwhelming feedback we've had so far as part of this project at both RMCG level with their clients or growers and Planfarm's growers is that many of them haven't looked into their businesses like they're doing at the moment. And the reason that is because it matches up the 4 pillars of any business, which is production, cash flow, profit and balance sheet. And I think that's where the skills that we're trying to drive out of this project to actually improve that with growers and that understanding of that. So that's the insight that we're after for their improvement, and also to understand what's either possible in their business or where they really need to focus in their business to actually make improvements. And finally, for industry insight, I think the most important thing for industry is that the growers do know their numbers. I think that's vitally important. It's just not just those that are servicing the industry to have insight, but also the growers themselves. The benchmark data is a guide to what's actually happening in growers' businesses, and that's important for research and extension information and activities that industry are actually doing. And I think too, obviously, the major focus on improvements, whether that be productivity, research, technology, whatever it is, I think that we've got to actually make sure that these businesses are heading to a more sustainably and competitive business. Okay, so getting into some of the data, and I guess to start right from the top is that a lot of the work that you'll see here is divided into most profitable, average and least profitable, based on the top 25%, pretty much. So what that means is that we've ranked profitability on earnings before interest and tax. And simply what that means is that earnings before interest and tax is farm income, less farm operating costs, less depreciation. And I think why that's important in horticulture, and the reason we've settled on that, is because there does need to be some investigation and also acknowledgement in a business that if you are investing in technology or infrastructure that's actually going to improve or make changes in the operating business, then those investments in technology or infrastructure do depreciate over time. So hence why we've actually included EBIT or made EBIT as the measure for the most profitable businesses. So here you can see a summary graph, which obviously in the blue is farm income, orange is farm operating costs, and then what's left over, if anything. And obviously what's really key here is that we see that the most profitable growers are producing significantly more income than the average of the industry, and nearly double those that are in the least profitable part of the industry. What's also significant here, and generally hasn't shown as trends in previous benchmark results or even in industry analysis, is that the most profitable are certainly spending more per hectare and actually turning that extra input cost into income. So I think that is an important acknowledgement to make, particularly, and what it's not saying is that, you know, just go and spend a lot more money just because they want to. It's actually that they can see that what they are spending, or the actual decision, the management decision to spend in a certain area of the business, is going to drive income or cost saving somewhere else. So as you can see, the actual earnings before interest and tax, so the EBIT number, is far greater in the most profitable, $22,000 a hectare versus just under $3,000 a hectare for the average of the industry. Remembering that EBIT then has to pay for what's left after that, has to pay for personal drawings, any tax payments, and any finance to fund the business. So the most profitable businesses certainly have, in every dollar, have 25 cents left over. So that's what that's saying, is that their EBIT margin is 25% of the total income. So they're spending 75 cents to make a dollar and actually have 25 cents left over for the overheads. In another way, so that's a graphical form, so in the hard data numbers, so obviously the most profitable via EBIT. This is where growers can actually use this data extremely practically and actually look at where they sit against the numbers. So these are the numbers that growers will receive in their individual benchmark report that only they will see. Again, these numbers here is what's been aggregated from all of the growers in the data set to actually give us this summary. What's added to this table from the previous graph is two key areas, which is return on assets managed at the bottom, so the bottom two lines, and equity percentage. And obviously what we're seeing here again is that the most profitable growers are turning that EBIT margin, that 25%, into 10% return on assets managed. And return on assets managed is an important measure because it also includes lease land. So what we do individually with the growers is make sure we actually ask them for the value of what lease land they're actually leasing and operating. And that's not the value of the lease they're paying, that's the value of the land. Because what return on assets managed is that lease land is a part of the management of the business. It's not owned by the business, but it's certainly part of the assets that are managed by the business. So how well is a business that's leasing land and maybe not leasing land getting returns on their equity or on their assets? Sorry, not equity. So most profitable 3 times the average of the industry at 10%. And I think in terms of a target number, I think loosely 8% would be a good result. So in 2023 results, the most profitable in the industry did have good return on assets managed. Unfortunately, there's a part of the industry that's obviously not making margin, and that's margin after operating expenses. So they haven't got enough money to actually cover overheads in the business. Positively in the industry across the board, whether it's in low profitability, average or top profitability, your equity percentage or the equity percentage of growers is quite strong. So 89% in the most profitable. Arguably, without knowing too much of the historical parts of the business, arguably a lot of that equity is based on land value increase in recent years, but also obviously those businesses are making EBIT margin profits, which is contributing to equity and decreasing debt. The average of the industry sits at 83%, and within Planfarm, we believe that a business that has 80% is in a strong position to be able to buffer themselves from a hiccup in any one year or in a second year to follow. So I think the industry has some strong equity base. Arguably, though, a lot of that has been from an increase in land value in recent years in particular. Okay, so again, just in terms of the graphical, the return on assets managed, that target number of 8%, you can see that the most profitable in 22-23. So this data was analysed from the 2022-23 year. So now almost 1 year ago, or is 1 year ago. With the average of the industry sitting well below the target of 8%, and the least profitable having some issues in their business. In terms of the balance sheet, I think obviously this is whole of business, so this is not just the vegetable production part of the business, this is the whole of the businesses that we analysed, is the farm assets in particular are significantly greater and the most profitable compared to the average of the industry. Farm debt levels also slightly higher in the most profitable. And in terms of equity dollars per hectare, we see some significant changes in there too. But again, across the industry, I think the important thing here is that farm equity levels across all ranges of profitability currently is in a strong position when we say that a target number of 80%. And interestingly, the farm net debt to income ratio, so that's looking at how risky the business is in terms of what production and profit and income it can actually make. We actually see ratios in all of the businesses as quite low compared to the target of 0.75 to 1. Now, industry-wise, that number used to be a target of 1 to 1. Obviously, as interest rates have increased and potentially, who knows, that they may be also continuing to increase, obviously that net farm debt to income ratio needs to be lower as possible. So we see obviously in the most profitable businesses, a very strong position equity-wise, very strong position with net debt, and very strong position with farm assets. And that's again on 22-23 results. The average of the industry, though, in terms of equity, still strong, and a farm net debt to income ratio well below the target. So there's some positive signs here for industry if we're looking at these results in isolation. Getting on now to some of the real intricacies on the operating part of the business. So this is about the operating and depreciation costs in the business. So what this table shows is vegetable costs as a percentage of income. And I think this is important to see because what this is actually, one of the keys about this slide is actually showing what the efficiency may be in a business to turn costs into income. So we split this up into key areas of a business, obviously cost of sales, production costs, which are around fertiliser, fuel, chemicals, seedlings. Overheads are things like professional fees, administrations, rates, licenses, so things that actually don't change based on how much production you produce. And we've also separated total labour, which is a combination of permanent labour, seasonal labour, and also family labour, imputed labour, and then obviously depreciation. So as you can see, keep your eyes on the most profitable column in terms of those production costs. If you can go to that second line, so as a percentage of income, the production costs around fertiliser, seeds and seedlings, packaging materials, anything that changes based on production, is 19% of income for the most profitable in the industry. And as an average grower, it sits at about 23%. So that is a significant difference in terms of turning production costs into income. What's really important here, obviously, is the line along labour, and probably the most talked about issue across ag industry, and not just horticulture, but particularly in horticulture at the moment, is that we see that the most profitable growers are spending 32% of their income on labour, including imputed family wages. And that means that if someone's working in the business and taking drawings, we've allocated that person to a particular role in the business and attributed a cost particular to that role. So that total labour cost does include family labour. So a significant difference in labour as a percentage of income. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the difference between most profitable and average of the industry. And obviously one of the things with depreciation is that we see as different to broadacre, which a lot of the depreciation numbers we see in the realms of anywhere from 8 to 10% or 8 to 12% and maybe even above. So the depreciation number as a percentage of income in horticulture is commonly 5% or lower, which is what we're seeing here. Now, turning that into dollars per hectare, and this is a really key slide to remember in conjunction with the previous slide. And if we can keep our minds around production costs, 19% of income for the most profitable, 23% of income for the average. And I guess what this now is showing us is that what are the dollars spent per hectare by the most profitable growers versus the average of the industry. So this is where I think it's really quite critical to analyse this data down to the level of dollars per hectare, because what we're seeing in production costs, for example, as a percentage of income, the most profitable spent less as a percentage of income, but they actually spend $14,000 a hectare on production costs. So that's fertiliser, chemicals, seeds and seedlings. So the most profitable spend 20% more on fertiliser, 45% more on chemical, and about 54% more on seeds and seedlings. And also fuel and oil is about 28% higher as well. So they're actually putting more cost into the business, which means more risk too, but they're also getting the outcomes at the other end in terms of income. And labour was the other one I mentioned in the previous graph. So if we go back quickly, the previous graph is saying 32% of labour spent by the most profitable versus 41. But you when look at it on a dollars per hectare basis, the total labour cost of the most profitable is $31,000 versus $28,500. So that's a significant difference in terms of how much more is being spent per hectare by the most profitable in the business. So I think it's a really interesting story so far. It is 1 year of data, but particularly what we're seeing here is that this extra input cost, and I think around production is really important, because in any sort of farming agricultural business, we know that the drive for production and quality production is what is turning into income. And that's what we're seeing here, is that the top line is the key difference between the average of the industry and the most profitable, $88,000 a hectare in 22-23 versus just under 60,000. Okay, so to pull out some more specifics in labour, and this graph is actually representing two things. In the bars, it's actually in the blue bars, you can actually see the vegetable labour as a percentage of income. and in the red line is the vegetable labour on dollars per hectare. So just pulling out this data from the previous table is very, very clear so far from 1 year of data. And this does follow up 6 or 7 years of data that we've been doing the same sort of thing in WA with vegetable producers, is that those are the most profitable are certainly maximising their efficiencies around labour management. Now that might be including technology, it might be including mechanisation, but not necessarily both or one or the other. It could also be that they're just utilising labour more efficiently with timing, spreading across different activities in the business. So in labour, I certainly think that what the most profitable are doing from this 1 year of data set is flowing on from what we've seen here in WA, is that they're managing the labour costs, not necessarily cutting them. And I think that's a really important issue to remember, and particularly when it's 30 or 40% of your income, it's certainly an area of the business where growers need to focus. I don't have specific answers to that on a general basis, but I think in every business, when you've got something that's such as a high cost of a percentage of income that you're deriving, that you certainly dive into it every year and make sure that there's something that you can do about it. And that might be around technical, might be around mechanisation, it might be just around scheduling of employees. There's plenty of the growers that we've met and worked with are actually using management apps for tracking what employees are doing. So I think there's those sorts of things are out there. Do they suit everyone? Probably not, but certainly it's a big area of the business that we need to keep a focus on, which I know all growers are and industry is as well. Okay, so that completes the data, I guess, the analysis of data. One of the things, obviously, I forgot to mention right at the beginning is that you are able to ask questions on the chat. So I apologise if people have been putting stuff in there, but we've also got a couple of our colleagues are online with me too, in Daryl and Donna from RMCG. So they've been managing the chat, hopefully, and here they are on video. Welcome, Donna and Daryl. So I'll hand over to you, Donna, if you've been following the chat. I know I could see a few hands going up there as I was going through, but left them till question and answer at the end. So fire away.
Okay, well, there is one question in the chat, and that is, are the least profitable growers typically smaller operations than the most profitable? And I think from my perspective, some of them are, but not always necessarily. And we've got some small ones that are in the more profitable group as well. Yeah.
I think it's a very good question. I think one of the challenges with some of the data is that the imputed labour cost can challenge some of the smaller businesses, can't it, Donna, in terms of what they might be paying themselves in drawings versus what that management position or that position in the business is worth on a commercial basis. So, but certainly I agree with Donna is that there's, in the data set that we see, there's no size distinguished between most profitable and the average or least profitable. There's no type of vegetable and there's no state that actually stands out at the moment. So obviously the reasoning for doing this project is to get as many growers from each state as we can so we can benchmark by state and also obviously nationally like we're doing currently.
Okay, so I'm not sure about the question from Ramesh, which is any qualitative collected in the survey to reflect into the most and least profitable growers. Qualitative data. We haven't recorded that, but each grower works with their individual consultant. So the individual consultants would have some of that information, but it's not something that we necessarily publish. I guess there might be some data around practices that we could do in future years, but in short, we didn't report any of that. So if there's any other questions, I don't know if people want to raise their hands or put it into the chat. I do have a couple of other things I can mention, but Daryl, is there anything you'd add to what Paul said?
Just, I guess, the thing about the project and its early days, and yeah, we have to be, I guess, a little bit wary of reading too much into this early phase, but the more the merrier. And if anyone's out there interested in being involved and participating, yeah, please make contact, because we say cash flow is king. Well, I'm a bit aligned that data is king, and the more we have, the more value we can get from the project as a whole. You know, it's a start, and we'll build on it.
Yeah, and in addition to that, Darry, you did right. I mean, the aim of the project is to build to 150 growers nationally in this data set across the country by year 5. So every year there'll be an increased target, and we've sat down with funders in Hort Innovation to actually work through that and make sure it's a balanced data set across each of the states based on their contribution to horticultural vegetables and onions.
Yeah. So Angus has asked a good question here. Was the cost of waste, crop or outgrades measured at all? So we haven't captured that data, but it was actually a point that I was going to raise, is that we've talked a bit about the costs in this webinar. There's also the other side of that, and that is the income, which is obviously driven by your yield, which is your marketable yield, but also the price you get in the pack out. So that's something that we haven't been able to delve into this year, but that's certainly something that's important when you're looking at your own business. And I guess that leads to my other point, is that the benchmarks are really useful for industry. They're really useful for individual growers, but often the most useful part of participating is looking at your own business and setting your own targets, because there might be some things where you have a slightly different approach, or depending on what your risks are, you might have a slightly different target to what the average or most profitable are for certain specific ratios.
It's certainly an area, isn't it, Donna, in many businesses that they probably should have some processes starting to be implemented on actually recording that data. Like we only really see the recorded saleable yield, don't we? And yet we know that yields in the paddock can sometimes be far greater. So I think that's probably something that we are definitely speaking on a one-on-one basis with growers about, is actually starting to some systems to actually record that, because what happens with that is that all of that waste that's actually not going into saleable has a cost to it, because the fertilizer, chemicals, fuel all become sunk costs then. And so that's an issue for a business. So any small change in turning waste into income is certainly going to the top line, because the costs have already been spent.
Yeah. So Ebony's asked here, is it a free activity? And the answer to that is for the vegetable and onion levy payers, yes, it is. Have we had difficulty engaging growers? I think in some regions it's been really easy, and we've actually got a list of people who want to participate in year 2. In other regions, we've got a bit more work to do, I guess, and we want to get a good data set from each region as we progress each year. So given that vegetables doesn't have a culture of benchmarking, I think we've done pretty well, actually. In year 1, but still some more work to do.
And I think in terms of Ebony also talks about some tree crops have struggled to get some growers engaged in benchmarking. I think one of the key things, and it's a really strong position we have, is about the confidentiality. And then Paul sort of outlined earlier in the presentation about how things are de-identified. So that is just absolutely paramount. And so any fears for people in regard to that, it's very solid systems in place in relation to that. And probably, I've been involved in benchmarking for over 20 years across different industries, and my line has always been, the biggest value from a grower point of view is how they're performing against themselves. What's their trends and the like. We can certainly learn from other data sets on what might be possible and the like, but it's just so valuable that the sort of like me against me over the years, and the trends and the decisions I make, and what impact of those decisions, through this sort of annual review and look back as we look forward to plan, to try and improve.
Yep. I think in addition to that, Daryl, we're lucky enough to be, as part of our role in the project, we manage the benchmark data set, but what we see of your growers is just a number. So we don't even know who your growers are that you're dealing with at RMCG in Victoria, New South Wales, Tassie and Southern Queensland. So I think that's the anonymity that we remain very strong on, and that the growers' information is the growers' information.
There's also a comment there from Maureen, Maureen Dobra from the Loose Leaf Company in WA, saying that they've benefited from this program of being involved with Planfarm. So thanks for that, Maureen. And I know, talking to some of the growers that we've been involved with just for 1 year, we've got comments like, we knew we should have been doing this type of thing, and they just didn't have the support to do it. So that has been some really positive feedback. And, you know, one grower said he'd been waiting for a program like this because there was a lot of other programs that focused on livestock, broadacre, but didn't really suit his type of business, which was a vegetable farm that was a mixed farm. So we're getting some good feedback from growers who are keen to follow how their data goes each year as well.
Okay. We're nearing towards the end. Are there any more there, Donna, that you can see in terms of
No,
questions?
no, there's just a thank you from Ramesh, but I can't see any other questions there.
All right. Any closing comments from you, Donna, Daryl, in terms of obviously next steps? We do have, you know, again, this project is running for another 4 years. We're collecting data now, from now on, for current growers that are in the system. And like Donna said, we've already got lists of expression of interest in some states to go and see for the next year as well. So the project is running live consistently across the year. Different parts of the program are running at different times of the year. And obviously this time of year is gathering growers' interests, collecting data and analysing data and visiting them with the results. So if anyone out there has interest or thinks that they may have growers of interest, or industry participants that may have growers' interest, please look us up on Level Up Hort, and you can go to the particular consultant in the state that you're in. So just refreshing that. So RMCG aptly manage Victoria, Tassie, New South Wales and Southern Queensland, and Planfarm are responsible for Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory and Northern Queensland. So leveluphort.com.au, and we thank again the project funders, which through Hort Innovation, and particularly using the levy funds of vegetables and the onions, and obviously the contribution from the Australian government. So we're very thankful for those contributors, because without them we wouldn't be able to put this information in front of growers and to industry. Thank you very much for your attendance. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, Daryl and Donna, for manning the questions, and also for your team and your input so far. Thank you, Lucy and Mark from Hort Innovation, for your support so far, and we're looking forward to ramping up Level Up Hort in year 2 and providing and bringing the industry and growers better and stronger information for their businesses. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.